Repeal the Second Amendment, says Bret Stephens, writing today in the New York Times. Now, I was actually hunting around the New York Times looking for a feminist article that I could take apart, and I encountered this thing, and I thought, well, given the light of very recent circumstances, this would be preferable to take apart. So let's have a look at what Bret has to say. Before I get onto that, there's a photo. I'll leave a link to the article in the comments section and pin it to the top so that you can have a look if you haven't already seen it. And there's a photo supplementing it, whatever, of a man with a rather aggressive looking tattoo on his arm clutching his rifle. So let's see what Bret has to say about repealing the Second Amendment. Oh, and please bear in mind that I'm a Brit I've never held a gun in my life. We have no Second Amendment. We've been stripped of virtually all our rights to actually hold arms to defend ourselves by Tony Blair. Anyway, Bret, was that his name, starts off, I've never understood the conservative fetish for the Second Amendment. Well, a fetish is a worship of an inanimate object, so I think he's going over the top there. And as far as conservative is concerned, there are plenty of middle ground people and people indeed on the left who are very happy with their Second Amendment. If you live in a rough area where burglaries or gun attacks abound, then conceal and carry permits would be, I would imagine, a lifesaver. But anyway, he continues, from a law and order standpoint, more guns means more murder. Well, that's highly debatable. Guns are for defence, as far as I'm concerned. That's the whole idea. If we had a Second Amendment here, I would have several guns just in case someone broke into my house, as law and order breaks down continuously in Britain, and you pretty much have little. You certainly have no right to defend yourself using a gun, and there have been cases in the past when people have used shotguns, which you are allowed with a license, to kill people entering their houses and homes, and they've been sent down for murder. Anyway, he says states with higher rates of gun ownership had disproportionately large numbers of deaths from firearm-related homicides. Well, okay, that's just common sense. From a personal safety standpoint, more guns means less safety. No, it means more safety. If you have guns, if someone knows you have a gun, you're holding a gun in your house, they're not going to attack you. And it's been proven, I'm pretty sure, that I don't recall the statistics, but that guns save more lives than they actually take. Anyway, he says, the FBI counted a total of 268 justifiable homicides by private citizens involving firearms in 2015. That is, felons killed in the course of committing a felony. Okay, well, those are the homicides. There are far more people who are not killed when they're shot by a homeowner or someone defending themselves, and many people will just fire a warning shot or two into the air and put off a crime that way, or they'll just simply point the gun at someone. You point the gun at me, I'll shit my pants. I'm not fighting. So that's the figure is almost irrelevant, frankly. Yet that same year there were 489 unintentional firearms deaths in the United States, according to the Center for Disease Control. Between 77 and 141 of those killed were children. Yeah, well, these are terrible accidents, but it's a false equivalence. So it's tragic, but that's a consequence you pay. You weigh it up all the time. You weigh it up to have guns or not to have guns, particularly, in fact, always, when it comes not just to defending yourself, but defending yourself against a tyrannical government. We have them throughout Europe. We cannot defend ourselves against the Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi plan to destroy white people using mass immigration from Africa and Muslim countries. I'm not blaming Africans and Muslims from that, because it's white people in control of this. Anyway, this guy continues, from a national security standpoint, the The amendment's suggestion that a well-regulated militia is necessary to the security of a free state is quaint. Oh, how patronising. It's quaint. No, it isn't quaint. And I've heard some really ridiculous arguments since the Las Vegas shooting about how it might have been Jimmy Kimmel, I don't know, blubbering away. Oh, did our ancestors want us to have AK-47s? The militia that defeated the British, because the British could never have been defeated unless not at that time US citizens, American people weren't equipped with weapons themselves. And after the war was over and the Bill of Rights was written up and all the amendments, the arms that the farmers and the ordinary citizens had were military grade weapons, and these days you can't get those weapons. So from my point of view, my perspective, citizens should have the right to exactly the same weaponry in terms of rifles and other weaponry as the armed forces. I can recall Piers Morgan asking someone, I don't recall who he was speaking to, and he said, well, why not? Why stop there? Why not go for? Why shouldn't citizens have tanks? And I say, well, hell, why not? If you're defending yourself against a tyrannical government, you need all the firepower you can get. Anyway, the Minutemen, minute men, I don't know what that is, that will deter Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un are based in missile silos in Minnow, I can't pronounce that, ND, I'll assume that's North Dakota, not farmhouses in Lexington, Massachusetts. Well, Vladimir Putin isn't going to bombard the United States with nuclear weapons because Hillary Clinton didn't take office. She wanted to go to war with Russia, a proxy war in Syria, which would have escalated without question in my mind. She also declared her wish to go to war with Iran. Kim Jong-un's weapons, as far as I'm concerned, don't mean shit to America's Star Wars program that was started, of course, by Ronald Reagan back in the 1980s. And it was the economics of that actually bust and broke the Soviet Union. You look at the former Soviet Union countries these days, and they're standing up for themselves against mass immigration, mass unwanted immigration. They've become the proud Christian capitalists, whilst the cultural Marxists of the left, the SJWs and the feminists and the Democrats are trying to impose cultural Marxism on right throughout the Western world now. And it would have been a disaster if Hillary got in. Bear in mind, I've taken no notes on this. I'm just doing this as I go along. So anyway, I'm going to continue. But I would say that the chances of North Korea being able to land a nuclear weapon on mainland America is fucking zero. That weapon would be checked before it even went into orbit practically, and it would be taken out in outer space. So, from a personal liberty standpoint, the idea that an armed citizenry is the ultimate check on the ambitions and encroachments of government power is curious. No, oh dear Lord. And now he's going into history now. The Whiskey Rebellion of the 1790s. Well, I don't know much about my US history, but unless I've seen a video on this, I'm sure. The Whiskey Rebellion, and please, any US person listen to this, and almost 60% of the people who view this channel are from the United States. I thought the Whiskey Rebellion was about farmers who wanted to transport their goods on their wagons in a more cheap way. So it was far more convenient for them to convert, corn, rye and whatever into whiskey after they'd had their crops. They got their crops and bartered with their neighbours, and they were experiencing, particularly on the Western Front, taxation without representation. So they converted their excess crops into whiskey and took it east, and then the government saw a chance of taxing that. I could be wrong. Please point it out in the comment section if I am. Now, the New York draft riots of 1863. Well, that was all about, again, this should be common bloody knowledge, that this was poor people who couldn't afford to avoid the draft and pay $300 to the Union to fight the Democrat slave owners, and they were absolutely outraged about it. But that has been turned pretty much into an issue of race, and it wasn't. It was that was a class struggle from particularly from poor Irish labourers who couldn't afford the $300. You know, why the hell are they going to go down south on behalf of the Unionists to fight against slaves who were going to take their jobs as they saw it? So, okay, you could throw in a little bit of race there, but no, that was mostly a class rebellion. The Coal Miners' Rebellion of 1921, again, that was a class rebellion, so fuck off. The Brinks robbery of 1981, what the hell? Talk about false equivalence. This is what the guy says now, does any serious conservative think of these as great moments in Second Amendment activism? Well, with the exception of the Brinks robbery, yes, I certainly do. I'm going to have to wrap this up quickly because I'm going over time. And now we have the relatively new and now ubiquitous active shooter phenomenon, something that remains extremely rare in the rest of the world. Yeah, because we've been stripped of our fucking guns. Hitler did it. All dictators do it. And Hillary would have done it. Conservatives often say that the right response to these horrors is to do more on the mental health front, yet by all accounts, Stephen Paddock would not have raised an eyebrow with a mental health professional before he murdered 58 people in Las Vegas last week. I thought it was 59. What might have raised a red flag? I'm not the first pundit to point out that if a Mohammed Paddock had purchased dozens of firearms and thousands of rounds of ammunition and then checked himself into a suite at the Mandalay Bay with direct views to a nearby musical festival, somebody at the local FBI field office would have noticed. Well, wasn't there that Pulse Club? Was that what it was called in Florida? That guy accumulated plenty of weaponry. And San Bernardino, 2 Muslims with bombs and Lord knows what, and firearms in their flat, and the FBI apparently didn't notice. Given all of this, why do liberals keep losing the gun control debate? Because you can't really debate. Okay, he blabbers on some more and I'm dropping down here. In fact, the more closely one looks at what passes for common sense gun laws, the more feckless they appear. Americans who claim to be outraged by gun crimes should want to do something more than tinker at the margins of a legal regime that most of the developed world rightly considers nuts. Citation required. No, I don't consider it nuts. I'm just one person. But loads of people I know think that, thank God for the American people, that you have a Second Amendment. You can defend yourself against tyranny and a tyrannical government. They should want to change it fundamentally and permanently, he says. There is only one way to do this: repeal the Second Amendment. Fuck you. Repealing the amendment may seem like political mission impossible today, but in the era of same-sex marriage, okay, that's a complete false equivalence. I'm going to drop down a bit here in the article. Here he offers a little bit of an olive branch. Gun ownership should never be outlawed, just as it isn't outlawed in Britain or Australia. Well, here in Britain, you can't own a handgun, you can't sport shoot, you can own a rifle, and you have to jump through hoops of fire to actually obtain that license. But it doesn't need a blanket constitutional protection either. Dropping down again, I want to wrap this up quickly. Donald Trump will likely get one more Supreme Court nomination, or 2 or 3 before he leaves office. Thank God. Guaranteeing a pro-gun court for another generation. Fantastic. Expansive interpretations of the right to bear arms will be the law of the land until the right itself ceases to be. Pathetic. And he says they will cite James Madison, who noted in the Federalist Papers that in Europe the governments are afraid to trust the people with arms. And quite rightly too. You can understand the government's not trusting people with arms, because if we ever come to a position where we need to overthrow the government, how can we do it without arms? It's going to be rather difficult. And isn't this the James Madison? Again, correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't he the president who fled the White House when Britain went back in 1812? And over there was some kind of dispute over Canada, I think. And the White House was burned down, and Madison fled. And eventually the United States fought back against the British, and it ended up as a draw. But I would be amazed if the troops who fought back against the British weren't also backed by the armed militia, who weren't necessarily part of any organised armed forces that were official to the government. Anyway, and then he says, America was supposed to be different and better. Yes, it is different in that you have a Second Amendment, and it is better because you have a Second Amendment. Be grateful for it. It's what protects you. It's what protects yourself, your loved ones, your homes, your neighbourhoods. It's what protects your liberty, your very liberty. It protects you against an evil government. What doesn't he understand about that? I'm not even finishing his article. You can read it yourself, like I say. But thank you very much if you've got this far, and please feel free to correct me on any mistakes I've made, because I've done this very ad hoc. I've done this completely on the spur of the moment, because I only spotted this article about an hour ago, thought about it, thought, shall I do it? And I thought, yeah, I will. So thank you very much.